Okay, in this video I'm going to cover how to fly a VOR ILS DME approach using the working title CJ4 mod. For those that don't know, I am not an instrument-rated pilot, and the type of approach we're flying today isn't really found in the US, so if I do something wrong or could do something differently, feel free to let me know in the comments. Okay, so to get started here, go down to our FMC, and we'll set up our approach. You can see we don't have anything set up after this Aberdeen VOR. So we'll go down to Departures Arrivals, and we're going to select the Perth 1 Golf Arrival. And for the approach, we're going to be flying the ILS for runway 5, however we're not going to select that approach here. Instead we're going to select the VFR extension for runway 5. For runway extension, we're going to select 15 miles. That should give us a pretty long line that'll help us reference where we are. And we can go ahead and execute. Now we'll go back to the legs page. If we go next, we can see we've got this discontinuity here. And before we fix that discontinuity, we'll just go over the approach plate, and that'll give us a better idea of what we're actually doing here. So what we can do is go to Chart, and this requires a Navigraph subscription. Also, if you are using Navigraph, make sure you go to Index, Next, Modset, and just double check that it is linked to the plane. So go back, and now we're going to select the chart. And because we select a VFR runway extension, it's not going to load the ILS automatically. So we just hit lower menu, scroll down to approach, select, and then we're going to select the VOR ILS DME for runway 5. Select that. And there we go. So we're currently going to be coming in from the northeast. And to initiate this approach, we want to come in on this 229 inbound radial to the VOR. It'll make our life a lot easier turning onto this outbound radial here. So first what we'll do is get this Glasgow VOR in there. So we'll just hit GOW and put that right before the runway extension, like so. And now we're going to create a point along this line here, and what that'll allow us to do is use the GPS, or the FMS I guess, to fly us down this inbound 229 radial, and it'll make our lives a lot easier on this approach. And so to insert that point, all we need to do is grab the Glasgow VOR, because that's our reference, and the bearing from this VOR to the point we want to create is just the reverse of 229, so 049. Enter a slash, and we'll put the point, say like 5 miles out. And then we'll just give it a name, so we'll say Bandit. Put that there. And then we can take the point we just created, put it on discontinuity, and hit execute. So now if I close the chart and we go to the plan view, I have it saved on memory 3. If you don't have the plan view saved here, you can press lower menu and then just scroll down to plan. So if we scroll through, you can see our arrival ends at Stura. Then we go to Bandit, and then the VOR, and you can see now from our custom waypoint to the VOR, it has this 229 degree track. So that's all we need to do for the legs page at the moment. Next thing we'll want to do is set up the radios. And for this approach, we're going to be using both of our nav radios, one for the ILS and one for the Glasgow VOR. And this is pretty easy to set up. Just go to Tune, and nav1 is going to be our localizer, so 110.1. Drop that there. and the VOR is 115.4. Here we go. And in the out event, we would need the NDB. We could type that in as well. This isn't gonna clutter the screen at all unless we put the needle up there, so there's no harm in putting that there. Now, just to cover this plate real quick, actually I have a better screen for that. So, as we already said, we're coming in on this 229 radial, and we're going to cross over the VOR. And since the CJ4 is category B, we're going to use this inner line here. So we're going to fly 219 degree radial out of the VOR to 10.3, or actually 10.7 DME. The 10.3 here is based off of the localizer, or the DME coming off the localizer. But we'll be using the VOR. So we'll come out to 10.7 miles, at which point we'll start a right-hand turn, intercept the localizer, and from this point it's just a standard ILS. One extra thing to note here is that we have another point marked here at 4.4 DME from the VOR. So if we bring this down, we can see our minimum descent altitude from the VOR to this 4.4 DME triangle up here is 3,000 feet. After we cross this 4.4 DME point, we're then safe to descend all the way to 2,400 feet. And then from there is when we turn and continue with the ILS. So that's all good. Next, we'll set up our PFD. Throttle back just a touch. So we'll go ahead and sync the heading. Enter heading mode temporarily. And you can see right now in our preset is VOR1, which is our ILS. So go ahead, switch the nav source. And we'll use the course knob here to preset our localizer course, which is 049. Come on. There we go. And now once we're within range of the localizer, we don't have to worry about setting the course. And we can do the same thing for the VOR. So right now the preset's FMS1. We'll spin the data knob. So now it's VOR2. Switch over to VOR2. And we want to be flying a 219 course outbound from that VOR once we get close. And there we go. And now we can switch our preset again back to FMS1. And now we'll engage LNAV. And we're good to go. And last thing here is we'll get the minimum set up. I like to do these pretty early just so I don't forget. And to that we just go to Refs, Menu, scroll it down to Barometric, select, and I believe it's 226, and my last flight was also to Glasgow, so it's already saved at 230. So that's good, and that is pretty much all we need to do for now. And you can see we're coming up to our top of descent. So I'll cut the video here, and we'll come back once we're approaching our custom waypoint. Okay, so here we are, coming up to our custom waypoint. Down here, which we named Bandit. And from here it's going to be a 229 degree track to the VOR. And you can see the airfield down here. For this approach I'm going to try and hold around 200 knots. Just to keep it consistent. Let's see, it's flashing here, so we're about to make our turn to the VOR. And I'm not going to use VNav or anything like that. Just use a standard vertical speed. Trying to use VNav for this kind of approach is just going to cause a lot of headaches. Okay, just let the plane settle. About, say there. So now we'll sync the heading, enter heading mode. We'll just double check our presets on VOR 2, which is the Glasgow VOR. Hit nav source, and triple check it's actually looking at the Glasgow VOR. We have the GOW identifier, and we've already got our 209 degree course, which we set earlier. And we're just going to wait until we're a little bit closer before entering nav mode. Say around half a mile we'll turn on nav. Okay, we'll turn that on. So now the plane's going to make a left turn, and then we're going to intercept, because we already crossed over it a bit, this outbound radial. And we can actually look at the chart here. So first point we're looking for is that 4.4 DME from the VOR. So right now we're at 2 miles. And I'll go ahead and set the pre-selector down to 3,000 feet. And we can actually start descending now. We just have to be about 3,000 feet at the 4.4 DME. So we'll just do a pretty shallow descent, about 600 feet per minute. And there's 4.4 DME, and we're nicely above 3,000 feet. And we can actually just
altitude
move our pre-selector down to 2,400 feet now. We don't have to descend to 2,400 feet necessarily. We just have to be at or above 2,400. But for simplicity's sake, I'll just keep it at 2,400. Okay, so now our next point is 10.7 DME. And we can actually get set up for that. So we'll take the heading bug and, in a sense, arm it for the right turn. As well, we can change our preset from FMS1 to the ILS. So once we start this turn, we'll switch out of the, because we'll be in heading mode, we'll switch the nav source out of the VOR to start looking for the localizer. Okay, just about a mile to go. Still holding around 200 knots, and we're above 2,400 feet still. There's 10.7 on the DME readout, so we'll go into heading mode. Verify we're in heading mode, and then we will switch, and now we're monitoring the localizer here. And we'll stay on the heading bugs, so we don't level out too early. And the wind's coming from our right now, so we might get blown past the localizer a bit. Just keep it coming around. And in fact, if we're, because we're actually at a pretty high approach speed, you could also use the category CD procedure. if you think you're going to be overshooting, which in this case probably would have helped a bit. Okay, so we're tracking back on course to the localizer. So let's go ahead and enter approach mode. So now we can see approach loc 1 is captured. So now we're going to start following the localizer. And the glide slope is armed, so once the diamond starts coming down over here, when it reaches the midpoint over here, it's going to capture as well. Or at least it should capture. And I've already started slowing down in preparation for capturing the glide slope. Okay, there we go. Plane's captured the glide slope. And we'll spin our pre-selector up to 3,000 feet in case we have to go missed approach. And we're within 7 miles now, so let's go ahead and drop flaps 15 degrees. And we'll get the gear down. And we're going to hold between 160 and 170 knots until about 4 miles from the airfield. See, we're tracking over here on the chart as well, which is pretty cool.
Autopilot.
Okay, we'll turn off the autopilot, turn off the yaw damper. Start slowing down to our approach speed, which is, I think, 114 knots. There's 3 miles, so we'll go flaps 35 degrees. And that should help us get down to our approach speed. And stay on that trim. And got a pretty gusty quartering headwind, so should be a fun landing. Hopefully I don't pancake it too bad. And slipping just a little bit under the glide slope.
500.
Get it back on. Okay, now I'm just gonna fly this in visually. About to hit minimums.
Minimums.
Okay, let's start slowing it up to VREF. And we'll go idle. Okay, get the spoilers out. Gently let the nose down, and we can start braking. we should be able to make this first turn off, which is pretty nice. Let's complete the turn before we do anything else. Okay, so we can go flaps up, bring the spoilers up, get our anti-ice off, and throw the taxi light on, turn the strobe off. And since we have it, may as well use it. Got our airport diagram. And so there we go. A VOR ILS DME approach using the working title CJ4.